Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willam clan of the Bunurong. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. So we're meeting tonight in a hybrid style with councillors, officers and members of the public in the Town Hall, albeit under strict conditions, and some officers and members of the public will continue to participate virtually via the WebEx platform. The meeting is being streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live, and streams and recordings of council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced or republished without the permission of Council. And of course, as per usual, if we experience any technical difficulties, we will adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve the issue. I do remind attendees that any member of the public addressing Council must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the processes under which it operates, and must take direction from the Chair whenever called to do so. Speakers must remain respectful, and statements or questions must not be defamatory, offensive or objectionable, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of council staff, or relate to a matter outside the powers of council. Councillors, first item on the agenda is apologies. I can see that we're all here, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is the minutes of the previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of May 2021 have been circulated. Are there any questions? If not, can I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Martin, and a seconder? Councillor Bond. I will now put the motion. That is carried unanimously. Any declarations of conflicts of interest, councillors? There being none, let's go to item 4, which is public question time and submissions. So we will now hear all the public questions and public comment on report items. All requests to speak were required to be submitted by 4 p.m. this afternoon, and submitters were given the option to attend the meeting in person or join via WebEx. Statements to be read by an officer on behalf of members of the public will be summarised. Tonight, everyone, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I will be a little flexible, but I will ask you to contain your comments or questions to the 2-minute mark. So we're going to start virtually. So I call upon Trina Lewis, who's submitting a public question to Council. Are you online with us, Trina?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I might ask officers just to turn it up slightly, the sound. Is that possible? All right, Trina, if you could state your name and suburb, and then please, you've got 2 minutes.
Okay, Trina Lewis, South Melbourne. So thanks very much again for the opportunity to address the Council. So my interest is in fair, transparent and efficient council, a council that focuses 100% on the broader community interests without strong political bias. In the council meeting on April 7, Councillor Baxter moved a motion in relation to the Australian government's intervention in the case of Julian Assange. He requested that on behalf of the Council that the Chief Executive Officer or the Mayor write to the PM or the Minister for Foreign Affairs in relation to this matter. The motion was supported by Councillors Crawford and Coventry. My question, one of my questions is, what has this matter got to do with local government? Why do councillors feel it their place to use their positions for political matters outside of their mandate? Personally, I'm appalled at the treatment of Julian Assange. In contrast, I know other people in Port Phillip believe him to be a traitor. So whatever the view, it doesn't matter for the purposes of this council. It is clearly outside the remit. So I'm shocked that councillors propose to waste taxpayers' time and money on issues outside their remit. We all want a better world, but please advocate for it through the right channels. I implore you to stop wasting ratepayers' time and money on things to promote personal political causes. I personally see this as an abuse of power, and I believe it needs to stop. I also understand in a recent Twist newsletter from a recent Twist newsletter that the council gave recently provisional approval for an event, and the organisers distributed promotional material for the event with both the logos of the City of Port Phillip and the branding of a politically styled organisation, the Progressive Port Phillip organisation, which the Twist newsletter described in their recent newsletter as a Labor Green community group.
So, Trina, that's your 2 minutes, so if you could wrap up, please.
Okay. So, again, I just believe that the overt political nature of what the council gets involved in is really disappointing and inappropriate. And I have 2 questions. Can the council guarantee that ratepayer-sponsored time and money is not spent on issues outside your local remit? Question 2, can the council guarantee that it does not use or will not use ratepayer money to sponsor events blatantly supported by blatantly political organisations?
Great. Well, we'll go
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Kylie Bennett to respond.
Through you, Mayor, the Local Government Act 2020 outlines the role of council, which is to provide good governance in its municipal district for the benefit and wellbeing of the municipal community. A council is considered under the Act to have provided good governance if it performs its role in accordance with the overarching governance principles outlined in Section 9 of the Act. These 9 governance principles require council, amongst other things, to place priority to achieving the best outcomes for the municipal community, including future generations. The economic, social and environmental sustainability of the municipal district, including mitigation and planning for climate change risks, is to be promoted. The community is engaged on strategic planning and decision making. The ongoing financial viability of the council is to be ensured, and regional, state and national plans and policies are to be taken into account in strategic planning and decision making.
Okay, thank you. I call upon Victoria Wilding, who's submitting a public question and in person. Victoria, if you could please state your name and suburb and then speak, please, or ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Victoria Wilding and I reside in Middle Park. I want to thank the Council for the opportunity to ask this question. Again, it points to the use of ratepayers' money. Why has the market performance not improved despite the massive investment from ratepayers? The last annual report showed a loss of $1.8 million. Why is Council allowing this market to keep losing ratepayers' money? What, if anything, is being done to cut its sizable and unsustainable operating expenses?
Thank you. Kylie Bennett.
Through you, Mayor, in the financial year 2019-20 and 2020-21, the South Melbourne market has incurred losses. This was due to rent relief provided to support traders through the COVID period, most of which were government mandated, and the additional expenses incurred to comply and adjust to new and changing COVID government restrictions. Over the course of March 2020 to March 2021, the Council have supported traders affected by COVID with over $2.3 million in rent relief. The Market Committee and management have done a significant amount of work to ensure the market starts to operate in a more financially sustainable way, and have recently submitted a budget to Council which plans for a break-even operating result for the 21-22 period. In saying that, we need to be mindful that there is still a possibility of further significant disruption this year with respect to COVID, which may influence these results. The market has also done a 10-year forecast which plans for small operating profits each financial year from 2022 to 2023 through to 2029-30. Financial sustainability of the market is also a key theme in the draft South Melbourne Market Strategic Plan, which is currently out for community consultation.
Thank you. I call upon Rob Marnie to ask a public question to Council.
Thank you, everyone. I did hear from Rob Marnie. He wasn't able to make it tonight. He sends his apologies. He'll be here next week.
Okay, maybe I'll go to Kirsty to read out his question or questions, please.
Through you, Mayor, 2 questions submitted. The first being, I want to know if the Council has a plan attached to their declaration of a climate emergency. And the second question is, I want to know if they plan to restore the tree planting budget to pre-pandemic levels of funding.
So for the first question, we'll go to Kylie Bennett, and the second question to Anthony Trail.
Through you, Mayor, Council declared a climate emergency in September 2019. This motion reinforced the existing suite of Council policy commitments, programs and projects that address climate change, including the Act and Adapt strategy, which was endorsed by Council in 2018. There is currently no plan to develop a climate emergency plan or strategy. Rather, Council, through the draft Council plan and budget, incorporated the climate emergency declaration as part of its Sustainable Port Phillip strategic direction. In the draft Council plan, Council has also outlined its intent to provide projects that support sustainability and climate change mitigation and adaptation, as outlined in the Act and Adapt strategy, are prioritised within available budgets each year. The draft Council plan report includes an attachment, which is attachment 4, the climate emergency response, which outlines Council's intent through the draft plan to provide $21.9 million of activities across Council services and programs in 2021-22 that address the climate emergency, reduce emissions and plan for a changing climate. This attachment is available on Council's website and is a useful resource for our community on Council's intent through the draft Council plan in this policy area. With respect to question 2, tree planting, I'll refer that to my colleague Anthony.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The street tree planting program in 2018-19 had a budget of $540,000. In 19-20, Council increased that to $640,000. As per the question in 2021, that was decreased by $200,000 due to the pandemic. The draft budget out for consultation at the moment has proposed an increase of $100,000 in 21-22 and 22-23 to offset the 2021 reduction.
Thank you. I call upon Paul Hickey, also asking a question. If you could state your name and suburb, and then you have 2 minutes, sir.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. Before I start my timing, Madam Mayor, I've got 2 questions. Do I ask them together or do I come back for a second bite?
Sorry?
Do I ask my 2 questions together or do
Yes,
I come
please
back
ask
for
all
a
your
second
questions
bite?
together, and then we'll get officers to
Does that
respond.
give me 4 minutes?
2 minutes in total?
For 2 questions.
That's all you've got to speak, yes.
Right. All right, well, my first question is with regards to what I asked about a month ago, which still hasn't been addressed. Why are the wages of this council so much higher than neighbouring councils, in some cases 30% higher? Why is the materials and services line item double what is paid by comparable councils? Again, this goes back to the unsustainability of this budget, which I'd be urging you to vote down, because the money that's being spent, I don't believe, can be justified on any benchmark. So I look forward to that finally being answered. The second question goes again to rates and rates burden. I noticed that commercial tenants have been given lease waiver during the COVID lockdown. One of the biggest recipients is Live Nation, a US-listed multinational that runs the Palais on this council's behalf. Again, I understand that the rate waiver, not deferral, rate waiver, totals something between $600,000 to $900,000. That's very generous of you. I'd like to put up my hand and say we should extend that waiver to all ratepayers who have lost their jobs or lost their businesses during this COVID. I look forward to your reply to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Carroll for the first one, and then we might go to Joe McNeil for the second.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr Hickey, for the question. I think caution needs to be taken in making gross comparisons such as this. Each council has a different service mix, asset base, capital program and ways of delivering services. Port Phillip, for instance, provides greater levels of childcare, aged care, parking, community facilities and beach cleaning services, as well as visitor management services than many of its neighbours. We also have different revenue sources that help offset some of those costs as well, such as parking revenue and government funding. We'll need further information from Mr Hickey on which council he's referring to comment on the 35 to 100% higher figures he's referenced. Based on a very quick look at Yarra and Stonington, the differences are much smaller than this. And I'll pass to Joanne McNeill.
Just before we go to Joe, can I just say, Chris, we do have hardship relief, do we not? If anyone was needing to contact council to discuss some of the options that we have available.
Yes, Mayor, we have some of the most generous financial hardship provisions of councils in Victoria, and people are encouraged to contact council through our assist office or online if they are experiencing difficulty, and we always work with them where we can.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr Hickey. We're going to go to Joe McNeill to answer the second part in regard to the Palais.
Thank you, Mayor. At the start of the pandemic, the Victorian Government introduced the Commercial Tenancy Relief Scheme to relieve financial hardship faced by commercial tenants and landlords. And that was the context then for Council considering its own relief package. And on the 25th of March, Council introduced the Emergency Rent Relief Package that provided rental waivers over and above the requirements of the scheme, and it also provided for a whole range of support to community organisations and local traders and other important sectors of the Port Phillip economy. With the continuation of the state emergency provisions, Council extended the initial rent relief period that ended on 30th of March 2021. While we have started to see the reactivation of many businesses and activities across the municipality, the larger entertainment venues such as the Palais Theatre will take much longer to recover due to the constraints on the industry. So there's no international travel, the length of time for booking those types of events, and also the nervousness of the industry in general in putting out bookings. Given the ongoing obstacles faced by this industry in particular, Live Nation requested Council consider extending their rental support. As the current lease with Live Nation is intended to harness and develop a long-term relationship that allows for activation of the Palais Theatre to the benefit of the community, including economic benefits, Council resolved on the 7th of April to continue to provide proportional rent relief, which means that if they are struggling, they will be provided relief. As they get on their feet, the relief will be discontinued. And that is till June, the end of June 2021, with further rental support after this date to be considered as part of the 2022 Council budget. Regarding the question of how much this has cost, the cost of rental waivers to commercial tenants in total to date has been $2.73 million, inclusive of GST, and separately out of that, for Live Nation has been $1.03 million.
Thank you. I call upon Warwick Renshaw, also asking a question of Council. If you could please state your name and suburb, sir, and then take your 2 minutes.
My name is Warwick Renshaw. I live in Middle Park. Madam Chairman, why are the City of Port Phillip employee costs so much higher than the Melbourne and Australian averages, and how is Council planning to reduce these costs going forward? The City of Port Phillip Services Profile Budget for 2020-21 lists employee cost at $89.5 million. That is $3.2 million or 3.8% above the Melbourne average cost and $15.6 million or 21.1% above the Australian average cost. Of the 28 services listed in the budget papers, 21 of the 28 services, or 75%, are above the Melbourne average cost, and 27 of the 28 services, that's 96%, are above the Australian average cost. These numbers infer either employers are being overpaid or the ratio of management to workers is too high. These disproportionate costs are contributing to the unacceptably high level of rates demanded by council from ratepayers. While it may be unreasonable for ratepayers to expect council to be operating at best practice, it is not unreasonable to expect council to be planning to be better than average, not worse. Madam Chairman, the benchmark What benchmark is council planning to use to measure employee cost in 2021-22? And how will working from home contribute to improved service efficiency and lower employee costs in the future?
Thank you. We'll go to Chris Carroll.
Through you, Mayor, I'll have to take that last part of the question on notice. I don't believe it was in the information that I got earlier, so I'll respond to that separately around the working from home, etc. But in terms of the broader question around our employee costs, I think, again, there's some caution that needs to be taken around using the service profile budgets to calculate our average wages, because they include our aggregated or consolidated employee costs, which includes elements that are not relevant for calculating or comparing average wages, such as allowances for redundancy, use of agency staff, work cover, parental and long-service leave. We calculate our average salary at around 4% higher than the Victorian average based on information from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. This is explainable given we're based in Metro Melbourne, whereas the Victorian average includes rural and regional areas with lower average salaries. Notably, based on Australian Bureau of Statistics information, we're around 10% lower than the average wage for the Victorian public sector, a key part of our market and a key part of jobs market and a key competition for talent. Council has substantially reduced its management and staff FTE over the past 12 months and constrained its growth in staff FTE over the past 5 years to 1%. It has continued focus on efficiency, which has enabled the council to operate within the rates cap, while its expenditure requirements, in particular things like waste, have driven excessively higher than the rates cap. That commitment to efficiencies has enabled us to keep within the cap and continue to grow expenditure in those key service areas. We've got an ongoing commitment to efficiency, and that's baked into our budget every year for the next 10 years.
Thank you. So we've received a number of similar questions that relate to the Local Festivals Fund. So I'm going to ask the members of the public to ask their questions, and once we've heard all the questions on the matter, I'll ask an officer to respond to. They're all very similar. So I call upon Bill Garner. If you could state your name and suburb and then speak, please, sir.
Bill Garner, St Kilda. I was one of the organisers of the musical balconies event on May the 8th, and I'd just like to say as a preamble, I don't think it's true that the questions all cover the same matters. Anyway, Musical Balconies was designed to bring free live music to the streets of St Kilda and to channel local festival grant money directly to participating musicians. It was hosted for free by residents who turned their garden and private balcony into a stage. Many locals volunteered long hours to plan, produce and deliver this mini festival. Provisional approval had been granted, and then a week later all funding was cancelled, just one working day before the event. Several questions follow from this. 1. How does this last-minute decision fit with good governance? 2. What changed in those few days to justify this drastic action? 3. Did Council receive any complaints regarding musical balconies before the event? If so, how many and what was their nature? 4. How does the initial delay in announcing successful applicants and the subsequent cancelling of the funding round for the Local Festivals Fund recovery grant fit with Council's claim to be expediting support for creative practitioners in a time of COVID? 5. Have eligibility and assessment criteria ever previously been queried after the assessment panel's recommendations had already proceeded to delegate sign-off? 6. Are the eligibility criteria being reviewed specifically to consider excluding progressive Port Phillip from applying for grants to run community events?
Is that your last question? Thank you, Bill. I didn't mean to say the same, sorry, Bill. I meant to say similar, so we'll get one officer to respond at the end. I call upon Rhonda Small, if you could state your name and suburb, and please speak.
Thank you. My name is Rhonda Small. I live in St Kilda and was one of the organising team for Musical Balconies. We first contacted the local Festival Fund Arts Administrator in January to talk about the idea of local residents offering their balconies to host a music festival supporting local musicians. We had a face-to-face meeting in February to go through the proposal, check all requirements for the application and ensure we were eligible to apply with Progressive Port Phillip as our incorporated association auspice. As our event was open to all, was not intended to recruit members or act as a fundraiser for Progressive Port Phillip, we were assured our project complied with guidelines and was eligible for funding. We submitted our application on the 7th of April with an event date of the 8th of May and a list of the artists who'd agreed to take part. Announcement of funding was expected before the end of April. Timelines were tight, but these were rapid turnaround grants, so we were hopeful. I contacted the Arts Administrator on the 28th of April to get an update. Should we cancel or go ahead? Our musicians were being offered other gigs and needed to know. I was told the announcement was imminent. Advice was sought from the manager signing off about how to proceed. That advice was provisional approval, go ahead with printing promo material, these postcards that we were letterboxing in the neighbourhood letterboxes, but don't advertise before the weekend, by which time the grants should be announced. We were given the council logo and all our artwork was approved the same day. We confirmed our musicians. On Monday, the 3rd of May, we received an email that announcement of the grants had been delayed, possibly to the end of the week, and we must withdraw any advertising. On Thursday, the 6th of May at 3:58 p.m, one working day before our event, we received an email announcing cancellation of the whole funding round due to an administration review discovering errors. This was shocking, to say the least. It also said a new round of funding would be held in June. This will include revised eligibility and assessment criteria to more accurately reflect the intent and desired outcomes of Council in providing these grants. So I have 4 questions. What triggered that administrative review of the funding round after funding decisions had been made and the announcement was pending? What were the errors discovered? How were they found? By whom? What is the intent and desired outcome that Council now wants for local festivals, if not what we actually provided in our neighbourhood with over 40 local musicians playing a paying gig on the 8th of May? And given the admissions of errors on the part of Council, will Musical Balconies and other applicants, and there were 7 applicants in this round altogether, be compensated by Council?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a list of all our contacts with the officers here, if you need to see it.
Thank you. I call upon Christina Kinst. If you could state your name and suburb and please speak to the item or the question.
Mayor, councillors, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Christina Kinst. I live in St Kilda and I was one of the organisers and hosts of Musical Balconies. On the 1st of May, 1 week before the event, I spoke by chance with Councillor Andrew Bond at Council's pop-up booth at the Veg Out Farmers Market. He alerted me to his concerns that Progressive Port Phillip had local festivals fund support for the Musical Balconies event. He said he had contacted the CEO that morning and indicated he was determined funding would not proceed, despite the fact that the grant had already been given provisional approval under delegation.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Just please hold for a moment, Christina. What's the
49.3 Part E, it's an error of fact. It's just been stated.
Let me just take some advice. So, Christina, I will ask you to just sort of stick to your questions and refrain from that storyline. If you could, not story, like that, those set of what occurred. If you could stick to the question that you submitted that you would ask,
certainly,
that would be great.
My questions follow. I was just about to move to the questions. My first question is, what complaints from councillors did the CEO and officers receive before the Musical Balconies event? What was their nature, and how did the CEO and officers respond? My second question. All councillors would be aware of Section 124A of the Local Government Act. It says, a councillor must not intentionally direct or seek to direct a member of council staff in the exercise of a delegated power or the performance of a delegated duty or function of the council. Given the Musical Balconies grant application had provisional approval already, how does its subsequent sudden cancellation sit with this section of the Act? My third question, when and under what circumstances did all councillors become aware of complaints about Progressive Port Phillip's auspice of the Musical Balconies grant? Question 4. Who made the final decision to cancel the whole second round of local festival funds? And my final question, could the officers indicate where and how the eligibility and assessment criteria for the local festivals fund rounds failed to meet the provisions of the Local Government Act? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I call upon Judy Gunson. Judy, if you could state your name and suburb and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors, for the chance to speak. My name's Judy Gunson. Oops, and my scrolling isn't working. I'm a musician and I live in East St Kilda. Oops. As you know, 2020, the lives of local musicians were impacted very badly. Our concerts and tours were cancelled and we were unable to work. My own trio had its Melbourne Recital Centre concert cancelled a week out from performance in March, and then we didn't work again that year. It was therefore lovely in early 2021 to hear that community members from Progressive Port Phillip were applying to council for some funding to run a local festival, a festival that was intended to benefit both local musicians and community. My colleagues and I were blown away by the hard work and commitment and, dare I say, the love that we as musicians felt from these members of the community, of our community. It was a beautiful event, inclusive, diverse, and local community attending were very moved. It was very shocking to hear about the last-minute cancellation of grant funding for the Musical Balconies event, and even more shocking to read Councillor Bond's in comments about progressive Port Phillip in This Week in St Kilda. Councillor Bond attacked progressive Port Phillip, and I quote, as a political organisation who spends...
I'm going to have to ask you to stick to the question that you submitted, please, and refrain from...
This is what I submitted?
No, the revised version, the officers advised you what the rules were in terms of how you could frame your speaking to council, so could I encourage you to stick to that final
Sorry,
submission?
I wasn't advised of anything. I haven't spoken to any officers, but I'll just continue. Could you just give me quick advice about what your...
OK, so the CEO will advise you just to clarify.
Through you, Mayor, at the beginning of the meeting, the Mayor reminded speakers that they must remain respectful and statements or questions must not be defamatory, offensive or objectionable or in any way aimed at embarrassing a council or member of council staff. So I think the Mayor's asking you to keep your comments to the subject rather than talking about particular councillors or council staff.
If that's possible, just yes.
OK, well, I do admit to some concern about behaviour of a particular councillor, but anyway, I think that's been covered. So, this is...
Find your place on the...
No, it's not my place. It's just that my concern was why one of our elected councillors is allowed to disparage a genuine community activity.
So, Judy, I am just going to have to ask you if...
My experience of the event and of the organisers was that they were not promoting themselves to Port Phillip locals, but they are Port Phillip locals and very caring locals. Why was the support for this festival withdrawn at the last minute, leaving performers and organisers in the lurch? If has been suggested, the grant scheme needs to be changed, surely it does not need to be done in such a last-minute way, causing pain and suffering to the musicians involved who have already suffered so much, as well as to the organisers and to the community. I request this. Could the council please find some way to fund this wonderful event retrospectively and to encourage similar events in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate it. I call upon David Bornstein. If you could state your name and suburb and ask your question.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is David Bornstein. I live in St Kilda. I was one of the hosts of the musical balconies. I suppose my only question really is, one, why did the council cancel this? And two, is council going to take responsibility? Because obviously, as a result of their actions, there were a lot of expenses, a lot of hard work, a lot of people basically left in the lurch. You cannot cancel. I actually booked a lot of the musicians personally, and they were friends of mine. My reputation was on the line. Musicians cannot be cancelled in 2 days, so we had to go ahead regardless. Is the council taking the responsibility? And also, obviously, just like to say that it really was a wonderful event for the community, for St Kilda, for the musicians, for the whole community. And does the council intend to encourage more of these as well?
Thank you, David. Now this one will be read out by Kirsty. It's from Jeannie Marsh.
Through you, Mayor, I read a summary of the question as follows. It was disappointing to hear that City of Port Phillip had decided at late notice to cancel the local festival's funding round, including musical balconies. At this time when the arts industry is working so hard to rebuild, what is needed is certainty. Last-minute cancellations cause havoc for musicians and event organisers and discourage the development of future arts projects. I hope that Council will learn from this and seek to avoid such situations in the future. The City of Port Phillip has a long and wonderful history of supporting the arts, helping to create and sustain the vibrant arts scene that residents and visitors value so highly. Can Council please clarify the reasons for the last-minute cancellation of the local festival's funding round and tell us what strategies will be adopted to ensure that such a damaging situation does not occur in the future?
Thank you. So in response to all of those questions that are asked, I will ask Kylie Bennett to respond.
Through you, Mayor, officers apologise to all applicants to the Local Festivals Grant Fund and our community for its service response on this occasion and the time taken to consider this matter. Recently, Council received some inquiries from our community about a project that had applied for funding through the Local Festivals Recovery Grants program. Following these inquiries, officers reviewed the matter, including when the grant process was last audited. In 2020, an internal audit was undertaken by Council's internal auditors of several of Council's grant funding programs. In this audit, there were some specific findings in relation to the Local Festivals Fund. Through the review of the administration of the most recent process, it was clear that some of these recommendations had not been fully implemented, including assessment panel composition, delegate sign-off and clear reporting and approval processes, notification of applicants prior to appropriate delegate sign-off, and review of the program itself, including effectiveness criteria, assessment model and program frequency. As part of normal practice, officers spoke with Council on this matter to advise them of the findings of this review. The CEO subsequently made the very difficult decision that given the procedural issues, the round of funding should be cancelled, the audit findings should be fully implemented as quickly as possible, and a new funding round be established once this had occurred to ensure that the administration of grants from public monies was conducted correctly to provide public confidence in the process. Officers are currently working with Council to implement the audit findings. Further details of this will be provided in due course. Any requests for consideration of compensation should be made directly to Council officers. Officers will follow standard processes, including reference to Council's insurer if relevant. Officers recognise that this difficult decision has caused great inconvenience to all applicants, some of who were very well advanced in their preparations. This is regrettable. However, it was important to balance this with the administration of grants from public monies.
Thank you. I call upon Sean Mulcahy speaking to item 9.2, which is the Rainbow Local Government Implementation. Sean, been here before. State your name and suburb, and you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Sean Mulcahy, Policy Advisor at the Victorian Pride Lobby. We're currently based in the City of Melbourne, but hopefully very soon at the Pride Centre here in St Kilda. Thank you. I'd like to thank Council to begin with for flying the rainbow and trans flags, and thank you for all your wonderful rainbow lanyards. And of course, I rise to speak to the recommendation on rainbow local government implementation. This includes the establishment of an LGBTIQA+ advisory committee, which also pleasingly includes representation from businesses and traders. Also, the development of an action plan in consultation with the committee and the broader community, and Rainbow Tick accreditation across council-run services, in addition to aged care services which are already accredited, which, it should be noted, is at a significantly lesser cost than was first proposed. The cost and timelines associated with this program of action are very reasonable. As the report to Council notes, the economic benefits of inclusion and adopting an inclusive approach is widely acknowledged, but often complex and difficult to quantify. So an action plan could include things like supporting COVID-affected businesses in their economic recovery, activating our streets with visible displays of pride, all things which benefit traders, businesses and, of course, the local economy. But this is, of course, much more about more than just economic benefits. This is about ensuring that we have a local government that is inclusive, accessible and responsive to everyone, regardless of our sexuality, our gender or our sex. I hope that you will support the officer's recommendation and, in addition, ask that the costs be included in the prospective draft budget. At the very least, I hope you'll take the time to listen to us and our community and treat our community with dignity, respect and fairness through your contributions this evening. Again, I ask that you as our elected councillors show leadership on this issue, support the recommendation and join our community at this month's Pride March. Thank you.
Thank you. I think most of us will be there.
I now call upon Justin Halliday speaking to item 14.2, the intention to sell 39 to 47 Camden Street, Balaclava. Justin, if you could state your name and suburb, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Justin Halliday, St Kilda East. Thank you, councillors. I'm speaking to item 14.2, which is the sale of the land at 39 to 47 Camden Street. First, I'd like to state that the revitalisation of the Carlisle Street shopping precinct is an important project for the City of Port Phillip. However, the sale of this land is being considered and undertaken without appropriate preparation or conditions attached to it. The proposed sale only includes conditions to maintain car parking there in the future development and the possibility of a trade-off of parking spaces for a public toilet and no other conditions. And if we've learned anything from Fisherman's Bend, it's that that land sales should not go ahead without conditions and expectations of those sales up front, so that we don't end up in VCAT shortly afterwards arguing with developers about what we actually wanted them to do with the land later on. We call on Council to prioritise an update of the Carlisle Street supermarket precinct design from 2011. It's 10 years old now, to reflect our updated expectations, and that the sale of land should be conditional on adherence to the updated supermarket precinct design. The updated design should reflect communities' expectations and aspirations for the Carlisle Street area. For example, it should incorporate better pedestrian access to the area, especially Nelson Street, which is frankly a nightmare for pedestrian access. It should include provision of public ground level open space in the Woolworths area for that redevelopment, which is not included in the current precinct plan. It should include the integration and completion of the Balaclava Station master plan, which is still incomplete following the redevelopment of Balaclava Station. It should also include the preservation and protection of established trees in the area. We have some beautiful trees there that developers probably care about less than the residents. Again, another point here: improved traffic management. Those of you who shop in the area will know the nightmare that is the Nelson Street, Alfred Street, and Arthur and Camden Street area. And finally, two last points. The redevelopment here, if it is a residential redevelopment, should include the provision of low-income and social housing incorporated into that development. And finally, the preservation and improvement of public amenity, such as through public toilets on both of the redevelopment sites. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Justin. I call upon Helen Halliday, also speaking to 14.2, the intention to sell Camden Street, Balaclava. Helen, if you could state your name and suburb, please.
My name is Helen Halliday. I live in Balaclava. I wish to address the council on this issue. I have already sent a question to one of the officers, and I'm just wondering whether it's possible to get an answer, which is whether or not this land or any of the land in the surrounding area was raised or bought with traders' rate-paying provisions. Is there an answer to that question, first of all?
Well, if you want to finish asking all your questions, I can...
Well, it will be slightly awkward, but anyway, I'll proceed. As the previous speaker, who happens to be my son, Justin, has pointed out, this land was subject to, and in fact the whole of that area, was subject to a Carlisle Street supermarket precinct design guidelines in June 2011, and it does not appear to me or to have actually taken into account the guidance that those guidelines were intended to provide. Specifically, the guidance was that the guidance should manage and coordinate and improve the public space in that area, and it specifically requests or proposes guidelines in relation to Camden, Nelson and Albert Street, none of which are included in the reports by the officers. The second problem is that even though those guidelines exist and can be and should be applied, there were a number of issues that were raised in relation to those guidelines which don't appear to be met in the report to the Council. Specifically, the guidance should include traffic management, car parking studies as envisaged in those guidelines. Secondly, and subsequently to those guidelines, the Council has embarked on a project to include the public spaces strategy. This strategy has been underway for 2 years now, and is still yet to be a finalised version of it. But certainly it does include requirements in relation to the public spaces strategy management of this area. Thirdly, is the included in the guidelines was a proposal for the Council greening Port Phillip. Once again, that's not included in the guidance. Thirdly, there is a new project that the Council is undertaking called the State of Play. Where is that in relation to the guidance? Fourthly, this area will include people living in the area. How will that amenity be improved? And fifthly, its immediate next competitor is Chapel Street, which has had $60 million spent on at least one part of it, which is their upgraded car park. Now, we're not expecting that, but we do expect that the benefits of the sale of this land is shared by upgrading this particular Carlisle Street area.
Thank you, Helen. We'll have to come to the end. Thank you.
That's probably enough for me. Thank you.
Do I have someone to respond to that? Or the item? Okay. So a councillor might take up those questions when we reach that item number. We've received a further submission to be read out on behalf of a member of the public, so I'll call that person's name out and refer to the Head of Governance to read the summary of those submissions. The first question, and all of the questions are from Adrian Jackson. So, Kirsty.
Through you, Mayor. And the first two questions read, before funding and designing any proposed bike paths and similar variants that will remove valued street car parking, will Council first consult by letterbox drop particularly, as well as in Have Your Say, with all residents and businesses either side of the street to see if the proposal is supported or needed by the people who live and work there? And in the same vein, before Council spends ratepayers' funds on bike infrastructure, they need to know how many pedal bikes riders are residents within Port Phillip. What is Council's data justification for bike paths on Council roads?
Who am I going to? Is that Lily? Lily Rosick?
Through you, Mayor. I'll answer the first questions in regards to the design of bike paths and consultation. On the 5th of May, as Council's aware, Council endorsed officers to progress the development of concept designs for 3 separated bike lane options for the safe travel corridor on Inkerman Road, and to provide these to Council along with a communication and engagement plan for the project early in 2022. The Inkerman Safe Travel Corridor is a high priority bike corridor for delivering Council's Move, Connect, Live integrated transport strategy. The recently adopted City of Port Phillip Community Engagement Policy outlines our promise to the community to consider the needs and interests of all people in the decision-making process and actively remove barriers to engagement. Without concept designs to illustrate what we're proposing, it may be difficult for some members of our community to understand the extent of the proposed bike corridor and how it integrates with other road infrastructure and the streetscape. This would reduce the community's ability to make an informed, meaningful contribution, and the consultation process may not be adequate. Additionally, the lack of visual materials may make it more difficult for anyone with language or literacy difficulties to participate in the consultation process. Project costing without concept designs is also highly uncertain, and this information would not be able to be provided to the community at this stage. Once concept plans are developed, a detailed community engagement approach will be developed in line with the Council's policy. The designs will be brought to Council for endorsement for consideration, and Council will have the opportunity to proceed with community consultation on the designs or rescope or reconsider the project. And in regards to the Council's data justification, I'll invite Mr T to respond to that question.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The bike corridors are independently prioritised considering crash history, population density, school enrolments, parking loss and so on. Protected bike lanes protect bike riders from moving traffic and people exiting parked cars. They shorten road crossing distances for pedestrians and reduce vehicle speeds, making the streets safer for all road users. In 2019, the City of Melbourne found that protected bike lanes reduce crashes by 41% compared to conventional bike lanes. City of Melbourne research found that safe bike corridors are likely to increase bike riding amongst those who don't feel confident. Surveys completed in 2018 found that 83% of respondents, including respondents from Port Phillip, would aim to ride if a protected bike lane was provided. An Infrastructure Victoria report found that a shift to riding is a cost-effective way to manage congestion. They found that an increase of 55% of people choosing to cycle is both achievable and could save inner Melbourne car drivers around 18 minutes in traffic per week. Modelling completed by the Inner Melbourne Action Plan predicts that the increment bike corridor could see at least 100% increase in riders if it is part of an integrated bike network. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question from Adrian Jackson.
And the question reads, why is Council calling for bids for funding for events and festivals during a pandemic? Will event organisers be told to consider the pandemic? If the festival is approved by Council, will Council tell the organisers to fund it themselves instead of use of ratepayer funds? Will Council suggest to organisers to charge an entry fee to cover costs?
Kylie Bennett.
Through you, Mayor, all grants given since the pandemic have had a COVID-19 recovery focus with specific assessment criteria. It is critical that opportunities are provided for our community to gather together in a COVID-safe way, and any events that are held during this time are required to adopt and abide by COVID regulations.
Back to you, Kirsty. Another question from Adrian Jackson.
Through you, Mayor, and this submission is on item 9.2, Rainbow Local Government Implementation. Adrian Jackson has asked what benefits Port Phillip residents will receive from the funding of the Rainbow Tick proposal. And a second submission to item 14.2, intention to sell 39 to 47 Camden Street, Balaclava. Submission reads, why doesn't Council offer this large property for sale to the state government at market value for the purpose of building one-bedroom public housing flats?
And an officer may take up his questions when we get to those items. So that is the finish of public question time. So we're now moving to item 5, which is councillor question time. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. This is a follow-up to a question I asked at the last council meeting where we were advised that the average annual rate increase per individual in the City of Port Phillip was 1.27% per year, and I've got a follow-up question. When compounding is taken into account, what is the average rate increase per individual over the past 5 years, and what were the corresponding figures in our neighbouring municipalities, and how do these figures compare with CPI? And I've got a second question. If Council's FTE full-time equivalent staffing from 5 years ago taken as a benchmark, what has been the percentage change in our full-time equivalent staffing over the past 5 years, and are we able to compare that with the equivalent figures from our neighbouring municipalities?
Dennis O'Keefe. Are you online, Dennis?
If not, Mayor, I might be able to answer some of that. Just give me a second, please, Councillor Martin. I might answer the second question first, which I have in front of me. Sorry, I thought Mr O'Keefe would be here. In terms of comparison with other councils, through you, Mayor, Mr Carroll's already explained some of the different contexts in terms of operating costs, but in terms of the 5-year shift in FTE, the City of Port Phillip has a net increase of only 9 FTE increase over the last 5 years, representing 1%, and that's less than obviously population growth in terms of services being provided. Yarra has had a 9% increase in FTE over the same period, Glen Ira a 9%, Stonington a 19%, and Bayside a 13% increase. So City of Port Phillip's had a 1% increase, and indeed FTE have gone down over the last 2 years. In terms of the average rates per population growth, I will just have to check that I've got the right figures here for you, Councillor Martin. I think it's saying average rates per population growth and annual growth. I just want to get the figures right for you. I think it's got here from Mr Keith, Port Phillip annual growth 0.8%, Yarra annual growth 0.9%, Stonington annual growth 2%, Bayside annual growth 2.8%, and Glen Ira annual growth 3.1%. So on both those indicators, Port Phillip is significantly lower than its neighbouring councils.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm wondering if Mr Trail would be able to provide an update on the lighting solutions for Lagoon Reserve and any transition arrangements that are currently being put in place to assist both dog walkers, walkers and local residents that live in the area.
Through you, Madam Mayor. At Lagoon Reserve, what we have set in place after consulting people that use the park as dog walking, and people have been impacted by the lighting that's there, that we're going to trial for the next couple of weeks a lighting program that turns on at 5 p.m. and turns off at 7:30. We're going to monitor and track this around usage needs. We think this strikes a balance between supporting the community activation there and some of the lighting spill that is caused from this lighting. I note this is a temporary measure until a future lighting solution is installed at this particular site.
Christina. Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Am I able to pose a question to the CEO that was just raised earlier by Councillor Martin? The answer for the FTEs, was that per population? Just wondering if, I know the first the second question that you responded to was per population, but I'm not sure if the first one is just straight figures or per population.
Through you, Mayor, that's per population. So the key figure there is probably not the net FTE, but the increase in FTE. So you're assuming, if you assume the 5 councils are growing at similar rates in terms of population growth, the key figure there is not actually the net number, but the percentage increase in FTE. And as I said, Port Phillip has had a net increase over the last 5 years of 1% and a significant decrease relative to 2 years ago in FTE in percentage terms, and that takes out the factor of population.
Councillors, do we have any other questions? Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Recently I've been receiving emails from residents concerned about the new parking scheme, where we're moving to a increased zoned area rather than your parking permits allowing you to park in your street and intersecting streets. And some residents fear that it will make it more difficult to park close to their home or in their own street. So residents have been asking me, if the new scheme does make parking more difficult to park in their own street, will Council be looking at or modifying the scheme, notably in smaller streets or cul-de-sacs?
Brian T.
Through you, Mayor, the policy takes effect on 1 July this year. Built into the policy is a review at the end of 12 months. So this would be a matter that could be taken into account as part of that review due in 12 months.
Thank you.
Any other questions for officers? If not, we'll move on to item 6, which is the sealing schedule, but we do not have any items for sealing on tonight's agenda. Then we have item 7, which is petitions and joint letters, and we have no petitions or joint letters for tonight. So 8 to 14 is the presentation of reports. Councillors, I advise that item 13.2, which is the Skyline Ferris Wheel multi-year permit, has been removed from tonight's agenda. So we're going to start with 9.1, which is the mobile CCTV trailer. Councillors, are there any questions of officers in relation to this report? Councillor Bond.
In the event we fail to receive a state government grant for this, or sorry, the question probably should be, is there a time frame on the proposal to receive a state government grant for this? And if that time elapses, could this be brought back to us as councillors to have another look at whether we want to fund it?
Anthony Trail.
Through Madam Mayor, I'll answer the first one, then hand over to Chris Carroll for the second part of that question. To answer when we will find out, the grant has told us a notification of the decision will be in the month of June. No exact date, but next month is when we believe to find out that outcome.
Through you, Mayor, in regards to the second question, yes, of course, we can bring this back to Council to consider. It may miss the final budget decision-making depending on the timing of that decision and the final budget for next year, but we do have a quarterly budget review process, so it could be something we could brought back to quarterly budget review or earlier if Council has wished.
Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Is there any indication from the government about our application in terms of is likelihood of acceptance? And if we are accepted or successful in the grant process, when will the funds be forthcoming?
Anthony?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we did consult the grants to make sure that our application qualified, which it did. We have not got any other information or intelligence on where we are until the decision will be made. Funding will be made available directly after a funding agreement is struck with the government after an announcement, so I'd anticipate that to take generally a 2-month process for that to occur.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Copsey.
Thanks. And I haven't flagged these at all, so apologies if they need to be taken on notice. Just a question around the timing of this report. So our policy is that we progress if we're successful in obtaining funding. What's the reason for the timing of this report coming tonight before we know the outcome of the application?
Anthony Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this report is coming in as a action from a resolution from the petition where it asked for us to bring in this as soon as possible. So that information is being brought to you. We're not preempting the decision. What we're highlighting here is that the policy is quite clear around where the funding and the options can be discussed after the grant.
Follow-up question?
Thanks. And sorry, the next is around considerations that have been undertaken by officers in relation to privacy. So given this unit can be deployed in various locations with I don't know what sort of notice, has there been a consideration around impacts on privacy in relation to that aspect of this unit, or are we relying on the policies that I saw referenced at 6.3 as being sufficient to meet our obligations?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have an adopted policy around the use of public CCTV. This camera would have to work within that policy, or a new policy position would need to be created.
Any further questions? Councillor Pearl.
I'm happy to move.
All right, no one else has got any questions? All right, Councillor Pearl to move. Who will be my seconder? Well, the seconder. Councillor Martin, Councillor Pearl. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I'll just speak briefly and then speak at the end, but very, very happy that the councillors have done what we asked them to in terms of the amended motion based on the petition response from a number of months ago now. Councillors, this is the way the process should work. We now have more information than what we had on the run, so to speak, through an amended motion last time, and this sets us up ready to catch the ball in the event that we are successful from the state government round of funding, particular the very legitimate concerns about what the maintenance bill of this equipment would be if council was to acquire it on using the funds that would be provided. Now we have that information, which is good to know, and I think this sort of level of investment is good value for money. We also have the details we need around the policy amendments that would be required, or the policy auspices which this unit would operate, or the units potentially would operate under if our grant is successful. So the officers have done a terrific job in terms of undertaking the duties of which we asked them to do a couple of months ago, and we thank them very much for doing that, and they've come back in a very timely fashion. Also, should this motion succeed this evening, it should provide the level of comfort and confidence to the state government that we're ready to fulfil our obligations should our funding grant be successful. So I wholeheartedly encourage you all to support this motion here this evening.
Councillor Martin.
I spoke strongly in support of this at a previous council meeting, so I don't intend to go over old ground. But again, can I echo Councillor Pearl's comments? Thank you very much to the council officers for doing the work that we asked them to do. Fingers crossed that our grant will be successful. We've got possibly a lead time of 4 months between hopefully the successful passing of this motion, and then if we're successful in, I'm not quite sure what to call it. I've been calling it a Dalek, but I'm sure there's a very technical name for our new CCTV installation. We've probably got about 2 months to make sure that every policy that we've got dots our I's and crosses our T's, and Councillor Copsy's flagged some concerns quite rightly. We've got lots of time to address those concerns, so this is the second step of a three-stage process to get a very much needed CCTV installation in the city of Port Phillip.
Any other Councillor Bond?
Can I move an amendment?
Yes, what amendment are you proposing?
I'd just like to add 3.6. In the event we are unsuccessful in this grant application, that this proposal be brought back to council for further consideration.
Let's get that up on the screen.
This should be in the event that council are unsuccessful in this application, that this item be brought back to council for further consideration. Councillors or council for further consideration.
Through you, Mayor. I think it should say grant application rather than proposal. Kirsty. Happy with that, Councillor?
Is that... Yep. Do I have a seconder for that amendment, Councillor Consolo? Councillor Bond?
Yeah, just tack this on to the end, because in the event we're not successful, I'd like this to come back to us so we can explore what other opportunities are available for us, whether that be further grant applications or any other method of funding this equipment. Hopefully we are successful and that 3.6 is a redundant clause, but in the event we're not successful, this is something we should certainly pursue and keep looking at.
Councillor Consolo.
Thank you. Is that on? Yeah. I also hope that we're successful in this grant, and this is just to keep it consistent to come back if the worst case is we aren't.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the amendment? Councillor Martin.
Can I thank Councillor Bond for his amendment? I think it actually strengthens our motion and it shows the state government that we're very, very serious about this and should give added impetus to help them to implement this so that we don't actually need to use clause 3.6.
Any other councillor like to speak to the amendment? All right, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That amendment has passed and will now form the substantive motion. So we're back to the debate, the main debate. We've had Councillor Pearl and Martin speak. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I spoke against this proposal back a couple of months ago when we were talking about it, based on privacy concerns, concerns that had come up in terms of the police's use of the mobile CCTV trailer in Stonington. None of those issues have been resolved and nothing has changed there, so I still think that this is a worrying invasion into our privacy potentially, and it's not something that I would want to support. I also note that there is a budget allocation here for us to spend money on this CCTV trailer. I'll note that this is a CCTV trailer to provide footage to Victoria Police for the purposes of the things that Victoria Police do, which is a state responsibility. I note that an earlier speaker who spoke at our council meeting begged us not to spend ratepayers' money on things that aren't within our remit, and yet I see this is exactly what we're proposing to do here. God forbid that if the grant was unsuccessful, I suspect that there may even be some councillors who would suggest that we would spend over $100,000 on purchasing this ourselves. I really hope that doesn't come to pass, because that would be a complete dereliction of our own duty to manage our money effectively. If the Victoria Police wishes shiny new toys, they should pay for them themselves, and the state government should pay for that, not us. So I will be voting against this motion for the same reasons that I don't think that the CCTV trailer to make mobile surveillance, to surveil any of us at any time in any public location, is necessary or useful.
Any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey.
I do share those similar reservations and won't be supporting tonight's recommendation for that point. Just a couple of other issues that have been worrying me around the footage that is currently collected, and I would like if officers can take note. I'm sure we can discuss this further through briefings, but I do have concerns around the proposed processes, which I don't know what they are, for where this machine might pop up, surveilling the community, and what kind of say or process there would be for council to either be informed of or have influence over that, what kind of alert there would be for people living in Port Phillip around where the surveillance unit might pop up next, and what's going to, whether we're going to provide opportunities for people to give feedback around that. It is a bit distinct from the systems that have been considered in the past, which are fixed location, and I think there's quite a few details here that I'm a little concerned about that we lack detail on, which I'd really appreciate officers to have a look into and provide us some further information as this goes forward. I acknowledge that the unit was quite popular in addressing a specific time and place-based distress that was being experienced around hoon driving. My concern is that with the funding of a surveillance unit like this, it's going to be used in ways far beyond that limited circumstance that we've discussed as a council. So those are some of the outstanding queries I have around this proposal. I acknowledge, though, and appreciate, Mr Trail, the response that officers are responding to the previous council resolution in bringing the report back tonight, so understand where we are with that process.
Any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to close off, community safety is core business for council. And Councillor Baxter's right, the City of Port Phillip shouldn't be doing the state government's job, nor should be the ones funding this. And it is in some respects sad that we are the vehicle that's lobbying for this, but this is an effective tool. It's been proved to be effective technology in the way it was trialled, and thanks to the City of Stonington and Stonington Police for lending us their mobile technology, which was extremely effective when we need it. Council and local police have been caught short a number of times over the past few years where particularly the disruptions on the foreshore, the St Kilda foreshore, where we weren't able to have a tactical CCTV response that was able to be moved around. The hooning driving, particularly in Waterfront Place in Port Melbourne and in other areas of the municipality, was the next such incident. And we were able to use and leverage the Stonington equipment to great effect. I think I was going to move an amendment to officially lobby the local members, but I think it's incumbent upon the Mayor and us as councillors also to make sure we approach the 5 or so legislative council members for Southern Metro and David Southwick and Martin Foley to ensure that they understand the push that the council is making and to ensure that those members of parliament support this measure also. This is a $200,000 odd measure that will provide potentially millions of dollars in community safety benefits to our municipality. The compounding effect of this money is really good value for the state government and very aligned with what this council is trying to achieve. So there's very few opportunities that we have as councillors and those members of parliament have to have a lasting impact with such little money. So councillors, let's support this motion here this evening and keep our advocacy efforts up with the state government to ensure in June we get good news from the state government and we can make our community and our city a much safer place than it is today.
All right, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried.
Division required.
All right, we'll vote again. Councillors, all those in favour? Councillor Consolo, Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikov, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Martin, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Clark. All those against? Councillor Baxter, Councillor Copsey. We're moving on to 9.2, which is the Rainbow Local Government Implementation. Now, we have an alternative recommendation from officers, which we will get up on the screen first. That's correct. So, councillors, do we have any questions of the officers in relation to this report? No? If there are none, do I have a mover for this recommendation? I'll move it and Councillor Martin to second it. I'll speak to it briefly. I'm glad it's come back and I'm looking forward to supporting this alternate recommendation that we now know have a clearer idea, which is what we always wanted, to understand what looking at the rainbow tick accreditation across our council would take, and we've got a better time frame. So I feel very informed to make the decision now, or to take it to the budget process to be considered. Councillor Martin.
And again, we've had a number of discussions both in this chamber and as councillors, and I welcome the full and frank discussions that we've had, and I think this outcome is an excellent outcome. The initial discussions were looking at a significantly larger sum of money for nowhere near as much bang for our buck. We're now going to get an advisory or a standing committee to help us. As someone in his first 6 months on council, I've seen how powerful these committees are, and I think to have our own rainbow standing committee to provide advice is going to be fantastic. They're going to help us as we work through the rainbow tick accreditation. I also note that the figure there that's in this motion for rainbow tick, one of the council officers has advised that it may be possible to negotiate that down. So the numbers that we're looking here are the uppermost numbers, and certainly it may well be that we're going to be up for even less money than we're committing to ourselves here. So I commend the original motion, and I look forward to, I believe, an amendment that's about to be put forward.
Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to move an amendment, please.
Okay. Can we get that amendment up on the screen, please? If you could read it out for us.
Yep, the amendment is to 3.2.1 and reads, endorses $36,000 to be included in the 21-22 financial year and notes that this will reduce the cumulative cash surplus outlined in the draft budget from 1.616 million to 1.580 million. Might need a point there instead of a comma. 3.2.2 notes that $13,000 per annum will be required in subsequent years, and this will be considered in future budget processes of council. And 3.2.3 notes a one-off cost of $90,000 for accreditation is required in 2023-24 financial year, and this will be considered in future budget processes of council.
Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Consolo. Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. So, though there's quite a bit of red here, it just the intent of this amendment is simply to include the $36,000 which is required for the 21-22 financial year implementation of the Rainbow Local Government into the budget, and note the effect on the surplus in the budget, which is where the funds will come from. I might just sort of leave it at that. It's fundamentally to ensure that we can get on with the work in 21-22, and if council is willing to undertake that tonight, that's the hope.
Can I just check that the word budget is not missing from that? Should it say in the 2021-22 financial year budget, so that we're absolutely clear that you're including it in the budget? Can I just check that with governance, please, on your behalf, Councillor Copsey? And you're happy to have that word put in there just for clarity?
I'm happy if that assists officers with clarity.
Yes. So, Councillor Consolo, are you happy for that additional word to be added? Thank you.
Thank you.
So back to you, Councillor Copsey.
Sorry,
No,
no, thank you, Mr. CEO. And I think I'll leave it at that, and we can speak about the amendment, and then I'll speak further on the substantive motion later.
Councillor Consolo.
So, speaking about the amendment part, I think it's important that we get this into the budget and it's clear that we make the decision tonight and move forward on this. It's a good result that we're going to see for the advisory committee and action being done sooner than just speaking about it. I believe in being inclusive, and this is important. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment? If not, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That amendment has passed. So that adds and becomes part of the substantive motion. Okay, so I have spoken and Councillor Martin has spoken. Who else would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight I am pleased that the original proposal of spending $250,000 of more to deliver the Rainbow Tick accreditation is now around the $135,000 mark, and this will be spread across 3 budgets instead of it initially being targeted for the 21-22 budget, or more than that $250,000 being targeted for the 21-22 budget at the 11th hour. I'd like to acknowledge the council managers, officers for finding ways to absorb some of the costs as part of business as usual. This is a good outcome, and hopefully council can continue to find savings as this program takes shape. The intention of questioning by councillors and now tonight's resulting motion, I find that we now have a more reasonable and manageable spend given the pressures on the council budget to deliver on many other competing requests by the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the motion? No. Oh, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm really happy that we're going to go ahead and put this in the draft budget. This is obviously something that a number of councillors took the pledge to do, and so it's really appropriate that we're going to be putting that into our budget to move ahead with it. I also note that doing it in the same week as Pride March is nicely poetic, I suppose. Although obviously things won't get started just this week; it'll take a little bit longer than that. But so I will say though that. While it is good to see that the cost estimates have come down since that original cost estimate, working out what these costs would be and how we would implement it was literally the motion that Councillor Copsey put forward a couple of weeks ago. All the councillors that voted against that voted against investigating what the costs were and how we would implement this. So to turn around and say, oh, look, I'm really glad we've done some more investigation when you voted against it is actually, to me, I find it hard to put all of that together, to be honest. But I am happy that it seems that hopefully some councillors have come around to the significant damage that has been done to our reputation within the queer community, and we can reaffirm our commitment as a leader in this space through this motion, and those councillors who have been committed to this can hold their head up high and march in Pride March on Sunday.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? You've spoken. Sorry, Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I didn't sign the Rainbow Pledge motion because at the time pledge. It's a pledge. It wasn't a motion. We went on council to make motions. And the reason I didn't sign it is because we couldn't cost it. We now have an adequate costing to be able to line this up, and the reason I voted against it last time wasn't because I didn't want to see a costing. It's because I wanted to see this motion, this idea in this motion, this concept, compete against other community items as part of the budget process. Particularly the item I keep on bringing up is the $25,000 a year of caring mums that we've cut. This project should be competing against the projects in the budget. And that's why I opposed it, because we had every opportunity to get this detail through the budget process behind the scenes and in front of our community. And I wasn't comfortable running this by itself. After the budget's approved and the council plan is approved, there will be a number of things that will change this council's priorities in a small way and a big way. And I respect every councillor's ability to use a notice of motion to do that. But before we were actually doing our 4-year budget planning process, I didn't think that was an appropriate way to do it. I thank Councillor Copsey for getting the details and being able to provide that information to councillors. What I also note is we're talking about a cash surplus here. That's true, but it needs to be noted that the underlying result of this council is still negative this year, and it's forecast in the council plan to be negative for the residual 3 years of the council plan. So we're still spending more money than we're bringing in, which is a concern. So it might be a cash surplus in that respect, but the underlying result of the council is still negative. Therefore, any increased amounts of money that we're putting through the budget are effectively being paid for out of cash reserves, which is concerning.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Well then, Councillor Copsey.
I'm really pleased and wanted to thank officers for all the hard work that has gone into preparing quite a lot of work in order to forecast some of the other work that we're going to be doing in the diversity space and inclusion space, and get good ideas around how this can fit in. I am really pleased that we have the opportunity tonight to move forward with this. It is a little bit serendipitous, having raised the rainbow and trans flags this week for Ida Hobbit, and having the Pride March on Sunday. I think it's really excellent that we can be doing the work and seen to be doing the work in this week, and I'm pleased if councillors will get behind this important initiative and move it forward tonight. The other thing that I wanted to take a quick moment to speak about was to commend the work of both those in the LGBTIQ plus community in Port Phillip who have been so supportive in contacting and expressing what the Rainbow Local Government implementation means to them, the real-world impacts that it's going to have. I spoke with someone this week who said how important it is that they feel supported accessing educational facilities for their kids where they know that they are welcomed and part of a community, and this is exactly the kind of thing that we can undertake to deliver with the Rainbow Tick accreditation for all of our council services. So I'm very excited about what that's going to mean for our community going forward. I'm also quite jealous because I can see some other councils that have taken the step forward with getting their advisory committees underway, appointing advisory representatives from their community already, and so I will be very excited if we can take this step forward and get that process happening for Port Phillip, because I know we have just a wealth of cultural, creative and community insight to get from our Rainbow Advisory Group when it's set up. So I'm very excited about that, and I did want to also take a moment to commend the amazing work that Rainbow Local Government and the Victorian Pride Lobby have done in advancing knowledge and awareness of the importance of this issue, not just here in Port Phillip but across the state. I note that of councils across Victoria, I think it was 55 out of the 79 have flown the rainbow flag for Ida Hobbit, which is an absolutely astonishing outcome. Sometimes I think that there is a lot of goodwill in this space, but what we want to actually see for the community is action. So to the Pride Lobby, thank you very much for the work that you've been doing to provide a really clear pathway forward for councils to walk the walk when it comes to these sorts of inclusion activities for our community. I think it's going to be really exciting when we see these steps come underway, and I look forward to welcoming our new advisory committee on board when we get there, and I also am really looking forward to seeing the rest of this work progress throughout the term, and thank officers for all the work that's been done so far and preemptively for all the work that will be to come. I'm looking forward to that journey. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll briefly close. We just passed a motion prior to this where we agreed to fund CCTV for $5,000 a year, and no one blinked an eye. And this is about safety too. It's about health and well-being and safety. And I think it's a small amount for a significant part of our community to take this step for inclusion. We're not there yet in so many areas, and I said this last time, the government has to legislate to do gender equity and inclusion work across public service and councils. So I really urge all my councillors to vote for this, because this is another form of safety. It may not be a CC, it's not a physical asset, but it is a psychological safety for families, for individuals, for the community at large. And I was at the wonderful Pride and Transgender flag raising on Monday, and it was such a wonderful event, especially when Jimmy the Queen sang at the end. And I just sat there on the lawn at the front of this town hall and thought, you know what, this is why I love living here and being part of this community, because our LGBTQI community a long time ago set this municipality up for inclusion and welcoming and kindness and being able to express who you are. And I think it is on us as this current council to continue that legacy. So I really hope that you will all vote to include this in the budget. And with that, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Moving on to...
Can I request a division?
A division. So all those in favour, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Consolo, Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikov, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Copsey, Councillor Martin, Councillor Clark. All those against? And abstaining, obviously, Councillor Pearl. All right, I'm just going to check the time.
do we want to take a 5-10 minute break? I would like to take one and then we'll come back and... Yeah, I'm the chair, so yes, we're going to take a 10-minute break and we'll be back shortly, everyone. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Martin and Peter Smith, the two Peters, go and sit in your respective corners. All right, we'll resume the meeting, everyone. So we are moving on to 10.1, which is the Dockless electric scooter trial. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers on this report? Okay, thank you. For anyone else, has anyone got any questions? No? If we don't have any questions, do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Copsey, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond, Councillor Copsey.
Well, electric scooters are amongst us, so I'm really keen to see this. I wish the CEO all the best in the EOI that we're submitting to the state government in order to hopefully qualify to participate in a trial that the state government is going to run around e-scooters with a provider. I think we really do need to start getting up to speed with this technology as privately the vehicles are starting to appear on our streets, and I'm hopeful that through this trial we can progress some sensible regulation basically around these mobility options, which can actually be really, really useful for last mile transport in particular and short trips around the municipality. I think they've got great potential, but they also come with some things that we want to mitigate, and so I'm very happy to support this recommendation tonight.
Councillor Bond.
Just briefly to say that I hope this trial goes as well as the current trial on the share bikes, the red bikes. That appears to be quite successful at the moment. It's not causing any of the inconvenience that we had with previous reincarnations or reiterations of share bikes. So hopefully this is as successful as that and goes as smoothly as that appears to be going, and that the company that wins the EOI for the scooters, the electric scooters, has similar type standards to the share bikes that are currently on our streets. So if they're looking for guidelines, certainly speak to the people currently doing the share bikes, because they're quite pleasing, the results of that.
Any other Councillor Pearl?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's important to note also the contribution of former Councillor Dick Gross, who this was one of many of his ideas that were put through, including a number of which I support and don't support, such as Ripponlea Gardens, the Morning of Morning, a number of things, but this was one of his main ones. Yeah, we won't go through the others. But this was one of his ideas which there was some concern about to begin with, but wholeheartedly support the original motion and very happy to support this motion. And thank you, Councillor Gross, for your contribution.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey, did you want to close? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is passed unanimously. All right, moving on to 13.1, which is the Cultural Development Fund. Do we have any questions for the officers? Councillors? No. If that, do I have a mover for the Councillor Pearl? Do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Pearl. Councillor Copsey.
I'm so pleased to see this funding round coming through and for approval. I want to take the time in the chamber to really thank those members of the panel who sit and assess these applications. I know it's from previous experience. It's a lengthy and also difficult task, as we are always provided with so many good applications, and it actually is really difficult to come to the final recommendations, as there's always more talented applications than we have the ability to fund. I think the Cultural Development Fund grant round this year, coming as a recovery measure, is especially vital. It's always vital to supporting our creative life here in the city of Port Phillip. But this year, when we are all so thankful for the work that artists and creatives have done that's helped us all to make sense of the times that we're living through. And when we're wanting to see our creative scene bounce back, I'm very pleased and proud that the City of Port Phillip can continue to support local artists by making these grants available. So I'm very happy to support the recommendation.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I will briefly. I'm the council delegate on the cultural development grants funding, and as always, it's a tough decision. There are lots of great applications with merit in lots of different ways, and we spend quite a few hours sort of wringing our hands over which ones we will exclude, because our community is very talented and very passionate. I know that there were some applications. This is for recovery still, and there will be other opportunities for further cultural development grants, but I do want to do a big shout out. We have lots of advisory groups or committees, people who live in our community who contribute so much of their own time to this, and can I tell you, some of these councillors have not been on a grants committee yet. It is a lot of work. It is such a lot of work. Worthwhile work. So I do want to do a shout out to Hanut Dodd, Bree McKillen, Tess Hamilton and Hugo Leshen, who are on the panel with me, as well as officers Sharon Dawson and Bowen, who all went through that process together, and they did a fine job, and their insight, sometimes I think I know things and then their insight blows me away, and I feel kind of dumb next to them, but I always grow from their insights. So thank you very much to that committee, and I heartily endorse, councillors, the projects that you will see come from the CDF. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Pearl.
Thank you for your service, and thank for the panel also for their service.
Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So as I mentioned before, 13.2 has been removed, so we're moving to 14.1, which is the proposed discontinuance of a part of the road, part R2975, between 17 Coventry Place and 378 Coventry Street, South Melbourne. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers on this report? If there are none, do I have a mover? I'll move this. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey. I will reserve my right to speak. Councillor Copsey? Anyone else like to speak to this? Shall we just put that, Councillor Copsey, to close? Let's put that to the motion. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. 14.2, which is the intention to sell 39 to 47 Camden Street, Balaclava. Consideration of submissions in response to public notice. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. If I could, I'll take up a couple of the questions that came through from the community earlier this evening. There were concerns raised from the community around where council is at in terms of its strategic thinking for this site and precinct. I'm wondering if officers could give some background as to what the current strategic thinking is and what instruments guide officers in coming to those views.
Is that Anthony Savinkov or Joe McNeil? Anthony?
Through you, Mayor. The item tonight is about a potential transaction rather than...
Speak more directly into the microphone. Sorry, Anthony.
The item tonight's about a potential transaction rather than a development or a development concept or development approval. That said, if council was to resolve to sell the site, a purchaser for a development would need to make a development application. In considering that development application, officers would be guided by the Port Phillip planning scheme. That in turn incorporates the Carlisle Street Activity Centre structure plan and the urban design framework. They provide guidance around preferred future use of land in that neighbourhood, and including landscaping and public realm outcomes.
Are there further questions for the officers? Councillor Copsey?
Thank you. And I will just take up the, I hope I capture the further question that came through, and understanding, Mr Savinkov, what you just said about which step council is at in the process. However, community members have raised queries around council's ability to require certain aspects or suggest or extract certain outcomes from this site. For example, community or social housing. Can officers comment a little on the options that are available to council going forward should this report be received tonight, approved tonight?
Anthony?
Council's intention, as has been publicly notified, is to sell the site with obligations to provide public car parking, car parking available to the public. That intention is made clear. Now, also, Council has stipulated its broader objectives for the project. So, out of not just this transaction, potential transaction for Parcel A, but also Parcel B and C, Council stipulated objectives including environmental, social, and financial. So, any application, so the transaction documentation will be formed up in a way that encourages those outcomes, and any development application made would need to show how it addresses the planning scheme and the requirements in the planning scheme. Now, Council's objectives for the transaction derive largely from the structure plan, which is rolled into the planning scheme.
Are there any other questions from councillors? I might ask one or two sort of in reference and following up from Councillor Copsey's questions. So the way that the recommendation reads, the sale, although it doesn't specify certain outcomes, it doesn't preclude certain outcomes like social housing or things like that if we can negotiate. And as part of that, I know there's the public toilet. And I wondered, would the responsibility for looking after that public toilet come back to us, or would that be on the person that would develop the site? So those are the first two questions I might ask, if I may.
It's contemplated that if a public toilet is included on the site, it's provided by the developer of the site. As set out in the report, the intention is that there's 60 car spaces provided, unless there's a public toilet provided. In that case, a minimum of 55 spaces available to the public would need to be provided.
And may I ask a follow-up question? I should know this, but what is the height limit around there, given that it backs onto other housing? Do you know that off the top of your head for development on that site?
We'd have to take that question on notice, Mayor.
And can I take up the question of Helen Halliday? Was there a trader's car parking rate used to create that car park? Do we know that generally? I know we are keeping the car park, but just to answer that question.
Mayor, the land, Parcel A, was not purchased with a special levy. That said, there was a special levy raised around that time or after that time, so it's possible that that special levy was used to reimburse council or partly reimburse council for the purchase and or to construct the car park. And as you've noted, Mayor, the intention is that the land be sold with an obligation to provide to provide car parking for the public.
Are there any other questions for the officers? If not, I have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? I'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond. I'll reserve my right. Councillor Bond.
We've been talking about this particular part of Balaclava since, I think, my very first briefing when I got on council back on 2012 was on the Balaclava master plan and the Coles car parks out the back and this particular area. So this has been going on for a very long time, and it's good to finally see it coming to chambers where we're actually going to progress those plans that I know council has been working on for at least the 8 and a bit years that I've been on council, and for a fair while prior to that I understand. So it's great to see it finally achieving some sort of resolution, and hopefully the safeguards and measures we put in place will ensure we get a outcome in this area that the community in that area requires. I think it badly needs some development in that area. It badly needs some bigger supermarkets and some better supermarkets, and hopefully we achieve them through this process.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. I'll just quickly put in my 2 cents worth. Look, I know that that area is not particularly aesthetically appealing right now, and there is a lot of room for improvement both in greening and just general public realm. I have the fantasy idea of a rooftop green space, but I've always envisioned that for the Coles car park, which is a much bigger space to do it, and that would be with public access. So although there is not a particular ask if we were to sell this land around the green space, it is captured under the structure plan, and I do think it is time to move forward. I am much more personally interested in what can be possible on that larger site behind Coles, but I do know that as it stands there is so much room for improvement, and I think it's time to take that first step forward. So I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is passed unanimously. Moving on to 14.3, which is Councillor Expenses Monthly Reporting, January, February and March 2021. Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Pearl. Happy to move it. Are there any questions? No. So we've got Councillor Pearl to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Pearl. Councillor Sirikoff. Anyone else would like to speak to the motion? All right, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is passed unanimously. Notices of motion. Councillors, we have no notices of motion tonight, so we'll move on to 16, which was reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, do we have any reports from being delegates, our delegate roles? Councillor Copsey.
I would like to deliver a short delegate report. I had the pleasure of attending the ALGWA conference, the Australian Local Government Women's Association conference recently. It was an excellent event. I wanted to take the time to actually commend ALGWA for all the great work that they do and for putting on a fantastic conference with a really engaging program of speakers, and also extend my congratulations to the City of Yarra for hosting a fantastic conference this year, which also incorporated some great cultural experiences in their city, which was available for visiting delegates. The theme of the ALGWA conference this year was Culture, Conduct and Retention. ALGWA has done amazing work in advancing women's participation in local government and seeking to increase women's representation in elected positions. They also do quite a bit of work around creating and advocating policy positions that will make local government more inclusive space for women to participate. The conference speakers were really engaging, very relevant and up to date, and I think it was a really excellent example of some of the work that's being done to advance gender equity, not just in the local government space, but more broadly at the moment. So I want to thank very much Council and the community for providing the opportunity to engage in that space.
Great. Would anyone other councillor like to make a report? Councillor Consolo.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to I also attended the conference from ALGWA, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to attend the conference, because not only were the speakers, all the topics were relevant and interesting, but just being in a room full of women who are in a role similar to me that I have no exposure to outside of people here today was very important to me. And there are 55 councils represented across the state, so I thought that was pretty impressive to have that access to that many people. And sometimes it's just seeing who's around the room, the ages, and there was a lady there with a newborn, and it's our third child, and that was just really reassuring to get us around in a room. I also think the City of Yarra did a great job incorporating more than just the speaking series across the weekend with other events. So thank you, everybody.
Any other delegate reports? All right, moving on to 17 items of urgent business. Councillors, we have no items of urgent business, so now we shall move to item 18, which is confidential matters. We have two confidential reports listed on the agenda, being 18.1, work cover update and preferred insurer, and 18.2, which is the commercial property leasing matter. So I now call on a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public to consider these two items. Thank you, Councillor Martin. And a seconder, Councillor Consolo. I will now put the motion. All those in favour, that motion is carried.